This is why I'm never going into the Pine Barrens. The residents of New Jersey have been harassed for over 300 years now by an unknown strange creature. The so-called Jersey Devil stalks its prey primarily in the Pine Barrens, which is a heavily forested area in southern New Jersey. But it does not appear that it is the only place that it haunts. The people of southern New Jersey are taught at an early age to beware of the dangers lurking in the woods and the monsters that are hiding in them. It was a chilling night in January of 1735 when Mother Leeds gave birth to a child she had cursed. It was the 13th child to be born, and Mother Leeds was much too poor to have another. Her husband was said to be a drunk and never had enough to feed the 12 children they already had. When Mother Leeds realized she was having another child, she had cursed the unborn child to be a devil, planting her own doom. It was a dark and thunderous night when the Jersey Devil came to be. The rough weather shook the Leeds cabin. On that bitter night, a baby boy was supposedly born. At first, the small baby was just like any other, with blonde hair and blue eyes, and suddenly, the baby began to change. The creature's eyes began to glow bright red, and large horns sprouted from its skull. His body began to double and triple in size, and large bat-like wings broke out from his shoulder blades, and his feet turned into hooves. The head changed into that of a goat, elongated and strange. Hair and feathers sprouted all over the baby. The beast screeched before lashing out at its own mother and midwives. And some say he actually managed to kill one of the midwives on his way out before he had escaped. He ran from the women, scurrying up the chimney of the small cabin. The bricks moved and fell apart, and much too large to fit in the chimney, he flew off into the night. The son of Satan, he was deemed. Mother Leeds' story does have some variations, though, of course. In other variations of her tale, it is said that Mother Leeds was a witch, a wicked, evil woman who lived deep in the Pine Barrens. It is said that she had gave birth to the son of Satan himself, the baby, coming out of the beastly creature with horns and wings. The story ends the same with the previously known Leeds Devil, now dubbed the Jersey Devil, climbing up the chimney and out into the night. One of the most famous accounts of the Jersey Devil was from an older brother of Napoleon Bonaparte. Joseph was a French statesman who was living not far from the Pine Barrens. On a particularly dark evening, Joseph Bonaparte was hunting in the woods not very far from his large estate. While exploring the woods, he came across bizarre tracks. He claimed that they could have been from a horse or a donkey, but the issue that came with that idea was that the animal would have to have been walking upright on its hind legs. As Joseph followed these tracks, he became enchanted by the mystery of what they belonged to. He followed them deeper and deeper into the woods, and they suddenly stopped. It was as if the creature leapt from the ground and flew off like a bird into the sky. He couldn't help but stop and stare at them, dumbfounded by the sight alone. He was unsure of what he was seeing, and he was so lost in thought that when he heard a low hissing, he was both shocked and terrified, his blood running cold, causing him to turn on his heel. He gripped his weapon tight, ready to shoot whatever he saw, but he was not prepared for the monstrosity he would lay his eyes on. The creature was large, and it had a long neck and a camel-like head, he described. Its legs were long and thin like a crane, but the feet were hooved like a horse. Its arms were small and looked strange with long, sharp claws, and there was a standoff as they stared at each other. Neither moved from their place. Joseph had held his breath, waiting to see who would make the first move of aggression. The beast's glowing red eyes filled him with terror before it finally broke their gaze. The monster hissed again, then shooting itself up into the sky, flying off before Joseph had a chance to shoot. He would return home later and recount his experience to his friends. They had all suggested the legend of the Jersey Devil. The legend had sparked an interest in Bonaparte that was strong, and so he began to actively hunt this creature. His ultimate goal was to have the very famed Jersey Devil as his very own trophy. In January of 1909, a man by the name of Thack Cousin left the Woodbury Hotel in its namesake town of Woodbury, New Jersey. When he steps outside into the cold night, he is stopped by a deep hiss. His heart clanged to his feet, panic setting in. Thack spins around, his eyes examining the dimly lit street, and as he was searching around, his eyes would catch a large blur flying across the street from one rooftop to another. The large glowing eyes were the most frightening feature he saw of this creature. He said they burned like two spots of phosphorus. He wouldn't be the only one to see such a beast. The week of January 16th, 1909 would be further known as the Phenomenal Week. The same night that Thack had seen the beast, 3 others would also see the terrorizing creature in the sky of Bristol, Pennsylvania, as well as several others in Burlington, Pennsylvania, and other adjacent towns. The next morning, all 3 towns alone had proof of this beast digging deep into the snow on streets and roofs alike. Even the bloodhounds refused to follow the imprints left by the supposed Jersey Devil in the snow. The panic would intensify, with the sightings turning into several dozen. The unusual tracks would continue to appear over and over, and reports reaching in the thousands. The fear of the devil would be deep among the people of South Jersey, prompting schools and businesses to close. Children were kept inside, and everyone's eyes were focused on the night skies. They were not the only county to be harassed by this unusual creature. Squads were created in an attempt to capture the so-called Jersey Devil. A prize was even offered for the animal to be brought to the local zoo, and money in exchange for the monster. Teams in several different counties had caught sight of the beast, but they weren't even close to the most terrifying. From monsters to humans taking a moment of vulnerability in the public to make a buck, people were creating hoaxes and gaffes. There was even an attempt to bring in a kangaroo with horns glued to the top of its head and false wings attached to its back in a cheap attempt to receive a promised prize that the zoo was offering. Even a Navy commander, Stephen Decatur, claimed to have seen the beast himself, and he attempted to shoot it down with a cannonball from the sky. He successfully placed a hole inside of the Jersey Devil, but it wouldn't fall. The creature would continue to fly off into the tree line. In Haddon Heights, a late-night trolley was making its rounds through the town, picking people up and dropping them off. Nothing was strange about the trip. The ride was completely normal until a passenger had shouted in surprise. A large dark creature was hovering over the trolley. Passengers crowded around the windows, desperately trying to get a good look at the flying animal that was on the attack. The trolley finally comes to a stop, allowing the devil to catch up with the trolley. The devil began to circle the cart over and over like a vulture, watching and waiting for the right moment. The beast screeched above the car, increasing panic over the patrons of the trolley. The sightings were consistent for the entire week, and the weekend ended, and just like that, so did the sightings. It came and went without any true explanation, and no one knows what exactly caused the monster to rear its head nor to hide from sight. The leading theory is that the Jersey Devil is a bad omen, that it symbolizes danger and death. The sightings of the Jersey Devil seem to slow down and then increase once more starting in 1927. One night, a cab driver in Salem City would stop off on a side of the road to fix a flat tire on his vehicle. The street was pitch dark and extremely quiet, barely lit, if at all, by gas lamps. He climbed from the car, attempting to fix the car quickly so he could make it to his original destination. Suddenly, there was a rustling in the woods, and he stopped as a large creature began to emerge from the dark. The glowing eyes of the beast stared him down, watching him closely, and quickly, the driver situated himself into the vehicle, shutting the door for his own protection. The devil would pound itself against the roof of the car. Over and over it attacked his taxi, trying its best to grab at the driver for whatever nefarious intentions it may have had. The taxi driver drove off, trying to get away from this monster, but later he would make a report to the police about the terrifying encounter. There was never a follow-up, unfortunately, from the police on the subject, but it is what it is. The 1970s and 80s would come before more significant sightings would return to the Pine Barrens. A farmer who had lived deep in the area, known as WHARTON State Park, would come out to do his usual chores. The calm, normal morning was quickly then turned into a scene from a horror movie. When the farmer approached his pigs, something had clearly slaughtered them all. The pigs were consumed alive, but only their brains were eaten from the animals. Whatever creature had consumed the pigs would have had to have been very large. Large scratches on the backs of the pigs showed the beast would have attacked from above. The mystery was never solved, but the leading theory is that Jersey Devil had attacked and consumed those pigs in the Pine Barrens. Keith was a young boy who would often find himself in the deep woods by himself, camping or playing. At the age of 13, he had planned on spending the night alone in the pines, camping by himself and enjoying the great outdoors. It was close to sunset when he decided to grab his bow, heading deep into the woods to hunt a rabbit down for dinner. He walked through the gradually dimming woods when suddenly he could just feel something's eyes on him. It followed him as he ventured deeper and deeper into the woods. There wasn't a sound, but he could just feel as something was stalking him as he traversed through the woods more. Keith went back to his campsite before it got too dark, but the mysterious animal stalked him all the way back to his tent. The night was pitch dark, and he could barely see a thing around him, but he could hear that the movement finally stopped. Keith made a judgment, deciding that it was safe enough for him to crawl into his tent for the night, and as he began to fall asleep, Keith began to hear something large stomping around outside of the tent. He sat up, ready to jump out to scare off whatever creature was out there, but before he could do it, the animal began making a strange noise. It was a loud screaming, so extreme that he could only compare that to the sound of a car horn going off over and over all around him. Keith froze, in place. He couldn't decide what he could do. He was like a deer in the headlights, trying to figure out the best course of action. He grabs his bow and his knife, but he knew there was no way there would be enough to fight off whatever large thing this was just beyond the safety of his tent. It screamed and screeched over and over, a loud burst of unusual sounds just pouring out into the air. And then it stopped, sudden and unexpected. Nothing could be heard now except for the rapid beating of his heart in his chest. No birds or other creatures made a sound, nor dare would they. He did not dare move himself. He couldn't leave. He feared that if he did, he would lose the head off his own shoulders. Even now, Keith will never sleep another night in a tent. Megan had her encounter with the Jersey Devil when she was just a young child. One summer, she and her family had gone on their annual camping trip not far off from the Pine Barrens. They were attempting to fall asleep in a very large tent with her family when she was suddenly awoken by an unusual sound. It was a long, loud screaming sound from outside of the safety of the tent. Megan was terrified. In her childish mind, she could only describe the sound as a woman who was being attacked by a wolf. Everyone around her was fast asleep, not even stirring from the strange sounds from all around her. She wouldn't know what she had heard until years later when she had found out about the legends of the Jersey Devil. Megan would later share her experience with her uncle, who was the only person she knew who could relate to her strange story. The uncle had a dog that he loved very dearly. The dog was incredibly loyal and would follow him everywhere into the woods, all around, all over where they lived. And on this particular day, the uncle was sitting on his porch, enjoying the day with the dog, when he heard the same scream that Megan would hear years later. The dog bolts off the porch, barking and snarling at whatever was making the strange sound in the woods. The dog was out of sight, longer than he should have been. Her uncle would begin to now worry for the old dog, when suddenly, the screams increased in their intensity, louder and louder. When suddenly, the dog rushes back with a yelp, shaking in fright of whatever that thing was so deep in those woods. The dog who would once follow her master loyally would no longer follow him into the woods anymore. Something had terrified this poor dog and had spooked him beyond what he could handle. Yet another sighting of the Jersey Devil would happen on a very different night on an extremely long stretch of highway. The highway is Route 9 and is the most commonly used drive down to Jersey Shore. Something that should be a fun and happy experience, but for Sonny, it was easily the most terrifying. Sonny would recount his encounter with the Jersey Devil. It was late one night as he went driving down the dimly lit highway, and on one side of him was a mini-mall. In front of him, there were two cars driving around 35 miles per hour. On the other side of him, on the long stretching highways, was thick forest that was overgrown and difficult to see beyond. Before he could realize what was happening, a large beast would rush across the expansive stretch much quicker than what would be expected. It was a large, monstrous creature, thin and extremely bony. Its ribs would stick out sharply from under its thin skin. It had little to no hair on its body, long, lanky body. Its head was elongated like that of a goat or a horse with short ears that laid flat against its head like an angry cat. It was incredibly tall, towering over the car, stalking its way across the highway back into the dark woods it came from. He would later on tell his tale to his friends, most of which would insist that he had only seen a deer on their trip down Route 9. Sonny was not so sure, because in his mind, there was no way a creature that strange and that large could possibly be a deer. Neither the shape nor the size of this beast matched, and he could not simply explain away what he saw. Sonny could not explain what it was that he saw that night. Even to this day, he refuses to go to Route 9 for fear of encountering the Jersey Devil once again. A biker and his group of friends had decided to go camping deep into the Pine Barrens. His name was Frank, and at the time, he was unaware of the dark reputation the Pine Barrens held. The first night was completely normal. The time was filled with a mix of drinking and partying until late into the night. They were drinking and generally enjoying their time out in the woods, and the strange things did not start happening until the night on the campgrounds. Frank and his friend decided to go off on their motorcycles to drive around the trails for their own entertainment while everybody else slept. The duo were only a few hundred yards from the campsite when suddenly the vehicle had stalled. Frank would look behind him and see that his friend was also stalled out behind him. The first thing he thought of upon looking back at his friend was that there was something involving the terrain that had caused the vehicle to stop, or even the power plants that weren't that far from their camp had somehow caused the bike to stop. But they wouldn't start, and they froze when right after, a loud screech echoes over the trees. It was monstrous and tortured. They managed to make their way back to their camp with their bikes, not working unfortunately, and their friends had also heard the same screaming, over 4 miles away from where Frank was. The night had fallen once again, and they decided to go into a local town to restock for drinks. Frank decides to go into a bar, and he orders a drink from the bartender, who noticed how scared he looked. Frank tells the bartender his story of the screeching they all had heard, and the bartender leads them into the back and shows a garbage can with 3 large claw marks in the tin. Mary was driving one cold winter night down GREENTREE Road in southern New Jersey. The road was dark. Nothing was in sight, other than orchards and farms down the sides of GREENTREE Road. Mary had no qualms about driving down the road, simply for the fact that she was from North Jersey and had thought little about nothing about the terrifying legend of the Jersey Devil. Mary was a simple college student, well-read, and thought highly of herself. The idea of believing in a myth like the Jersey Devil was silly, something she could not simply believe in. That night, however, her mind would be changed completely. Mary was her complete self that night on GREENTREE Road, completely awake and not a drop of alcohol was in her blood. Her drive was quiet down that long stretch, and she was ready to get home to her apartment. It was then that something had caught her eye in her rearview mirror. The moon highlighted the shape of a strange creature that shambled across the road. The light from the sky was the only thing that had allowed her to see the strange being that passed her by. Whatever it was about 25 feet away from her vehicle when it appeared. She couldn't believe her eyes. The sight was blood-chilling, so Mary had to slow down her car to get a better look at whatever this was that had now made its way across the road. Whatever the creature was, it was tall, much taller than any human Mary had ever seen. Its haunches were thick and furry like a goat, and its torso looked vaguely human but had a large set of leathery bat wings. Its head, too, was unusually large. The beast creature moved slowly across the road, not even paying any attention to Mary's car. For her own safety, Mary turned her vehicle back into driving before rushing away from the monster behind her. Mary claimed that upon arrival at her home, she slept the entire night in her car for fear the Jersey Devil was so powerful she couldn't get herself to leave her car in the middle of the night. And ever since her encounter in the winter of 1972, she has flat out refused to drive down GREENTREE Road, day or night, for fear of encountering this devil once more. Kelly was a native to South New Jersey, and each year, her high school would take the students with the highest grades on a special trip into the Pine Barrens. Each year, she would canoe, and each year it would be the same. She would be watching over her shoulder as crackling branches and growling would follow her as she went through the rapids. Even the memories bring her chills. Kelly was trapped on these trips, and she couldn't run away or leave the campsite as she was followed by the creature's heavy footprints. It was in her sophomore year that she had discovered something to confirm her fears. Kelly and friends had gone canoeing when they had stumbled upon a bag that was torn apart and rifled through. Large hoofprints, larger than a horse mind you, were left all around the bag. They stopped to examine them further, only for the signature scream to drag their attention elsewhere. It was long and angry. It was a mix of a man and beast with a rage that could be felt deeply in your bones. They rushed away, doing their best to canoe away from the sound, but they kept hearing it rushing through the trees. Kelly was now terrified, so they left as quickly as they could. Her canoe had moved through the water, nearly flipping, and it followed them down the rapids, growling and rustling through every time in the trees. And every time they stopped, it appeared to be getting closer and closer. And then suddenly, the canoe flipped over. The teenagers were terrified. The footfalls of the beast were all around them, getting closer and closer. Kelly was certain she was going to die right then and there. In a panic, the two righted their canoes, rushing to get back to their campsite. Finally, they returned to their peers, soaked and exhausted and terrified. pretty much traumatized. They were missing practically everything they had left with. They were so distraught by the encounter that they packed up on the bus and left for a full year after that, never returning. So what do you guys think? Is the Jersey Devil real? Is there truly something mysterious and supernatural stalking the Pine Barrens of South Jersey? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to go ahead and smack that like button. And if you're new to the channel and enjoy the content, be sure to go ahead and hit the subscribe button and keep your notifications turned on. As always, guys, I love you all. Keep an open mind, and I will see you guys in the very next video.